All right, this one is going to really make us work for it. Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you guys are all doing well. Today we are going to be dividing our dahlias, which is really exciting. It's one of those chores that I actually look forward to now, just because I've been doing it for a while now and it feels like I feel very confident in it. And it's just that time to get our clumps out of storage, get them divided, and kind of prepping them to get them planted in May. So it's just like one of those things that it makes me look forward to it because I know that time of the year is right around the corner. So last year we did a video where we showed you guys like the anatomy of a tuber. We kind of went into very detailed description of what you're looking for. We're going to be doing something similar to that this year. We're going to start off by, I'm going to show you guys what you're going to need to successfully divide your clumps. We'll discuss a little bit again the anatomy of a tuber. I think it's just always good to kind of refresh, especially if you're new to this. If you are new to this, don't be intimidated. It's going to be okay. I love the community that we have here. I feel like we're all very helpful with each other. So if at the end of this video, if things are still unclear or you have any questions, make sure to write them down in the comment section. But you're going to be just fine. Don't get overwhelmed and don't be intimidated. It's like once you start rolling, it's the easiest thing to do. And I swear you could just do it like with your eyes closed by the end of it. So anyways, let me show you what you're going to need and then we will dig right in. Okay, so this is what you're going to need for today's video. So let's just start off with some of the tools that we'll use. I always like to have pruners in hand. I just have my fiskars right here. I also have some scissors just to clean up the roots. These little roots that are just kind of dangling off of the tuber. I also always use a knife. This is just one of my kitchen knives that I've designated to gardening, so it's my gardening knife now. And then I also have these pointy beak little snips. I love these so much. These just really get in there and allow us to make like some nice sharp cuts. So I have a few varieties in here. There is one more that I can't find and it's a red one and it looks similar to this, but it opens up a little bit more. So you're able to get in a little bit more precise in little tight areas. And then let's see, I also just have my sharpening little thing to sharpen my blades. I hate using dull things when I'm doing this. I also have a Dahlia dividing knife. This is just almost like a carpenter's knife and it allows us to really get into like tight little areas. So you'll see when we use it. So I love that. If you were to ask me, tell me I can only keep two things in this whole area here, I would probably keep this one, these snips, and then my knife. Because the knife I just think really allows us to cut down the middle of really difficult and like stiff clumps. So that. Now for cleaning, so for our cleaning station, we will need some isopropyl alcohol. I have this little container here, which is really cool. It has little bristles inside. And you can actually take these out when you're done. It's a little bit hard to do, but you take these out when you're done and you see it has those bristles. But when you're using it, you fill it up with the isopropyl alcohol and then you can just take your tools when you're working, shove them in there and just go in and out and it'll clean with those bristles and then you have the alcohol in there. So it makes cleaning super, super easy. I always like to clean between each clump that we divide so we're not spreading any bacteria. Also in our cleaning area, we will need like an old toothbrush. This will allow us to get into like little areas to clean off any dirt or soil around our eyes. So we'll have better visibility. And then for labeling, I'm going to be using this indelible pencil. So we actually talked about this last year. This allows us to write directly onto the tubers, similar to like this one here. You see this one it's labeled from last year. This one's Crazy Legs and there's still a tag on it, or not a tag, but the writing is still on it. So, and then let's see, if you don't have an indelible pencil, you can use a Sharpie actually. Let's see if I can, this is so embarrassing. I have so many seeds and oh my gosh. I keep forgetting that I have them and then I keep buying them and it just becomes like a vicious cycle. Oh my gosh, look at this. This is so embarrassing. Pretend like this is not here. Let me see if I probably don't have a Sharpie, but either way, I'm just going to use my indelible pencil. So you obviously need your clumps. So I think what I'm going to do is we have some that are very easy to divide, and then some that are a little bit more intense or a little bit more complicated and a little bit more difficult. So we'll just work our way up similar to how we did it last year. So I think we'll set up the camera from top to bottom. That way you guys can see kind of like in my point of view, because you don't really need to see me for this, but you do need to see what's going on our table. And I also have gloves. This is just because I adjust my camera sometimes, and when my hands are dirty, I don't like to touch my camera, so that's why I have that. So anyways, let's get started. And again, you don't need all of these tools to be successful at dividing your dahlias. I just wanted to show you kind of an array of things that you can have in your toolbox to have a successful experience dividing your tubers. I think if I were to only choose like two, I would probably pick those pointy snips and a knife, because I think it's just, those two are very universal. Last year I was really relying on my pruners, but this year I've like been really just like hammering these out so quickly with the knife and those pointy snips. And there is another one that I don't have right now that I don't know where I put it, but it's a red one. I'll make sure to link it down below. And that one kind of opens up a little bit more, which is nice. It's not as closed off as some of these other ones. But yeah, so don't be intimidated. So now let's go ahead and divide one tuber, and then I'm going to show you the anatomy on that one tuber, and then we'll just continue on. So before we get started, let's talk about the anatomy of a clump, and then we'll jump into talking about the anatomy of a tuber, similar to what we did last year. So as you can see, there are multiple little tubers here, and together they make up this clump. So this whole thing is a clump. Now, when we're looking at this, you can see that this was the stalk. So this is where that growth was. And right over here, all the way around, this is what we call the collar, or it's also known as the crown. And that is where you're going to find your eyes, which is going to be the growth point of your tuber. So this one, it looks pretty easy. Let's go ahead and divide this, this clump here. Let me get this tuber out, and then we will talk about the anatomy of a tuber. So just like that. Perfect. Cut this off. Perfect. This is a perfect example of a tuber. And again, I'm just going to wipe the surface here to show you, similar to how I did last year with my indelible pencils. So this is a tuber, and let's talk about the different parts of this tuber. Right over here, this bigger portion, this is the body. So this is what gives energy to your flower to grow. Sometimes they produce little ones, sometimes they produce really long ones, sometimes they produce really skinny ones. It really depends on the variety of dahlia. So don't think because your tubers might not look like this, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that this variety specifically produces tubers that look similar to this one. So this one is called iced tea. Now, of course, we have the body, and then we also have the neck right over here, which is kind of this smaller part. And sometimes you don't even see the neck because the tuber might be so just chunky. So like this one over here, you can see the neck is really, really large on this one. Sometimes it's even larger. So back to our tuber, we have the body, we have the neck, and now we have the eye. And to show you the eye, again, I'm just going to moisten this, and I'm going to circle it for you to see. The eye is right here. Do you see that? So that little swelling, it almost looks like a little pimple, is the eye. That is your growth point. That is the brain of this whole tuber. If you do not have an eye, but you have a neck and you have a body, you have nothing. You have to have an eye in order for it to be a viable tuber. Now, sometimes these eyes are not as visible. So what you can do in that case is just plant up your tubers. I would recommend doing it in a container and see if it sprouts. Sometimes you guys will see we're going to divide some of our clumps, and we're going to have two tubers connected to one because sometimes they might be sharing that eye. Sometimes we will get clumps or tubers that are connected together and has multiple eyes. Well, that just means you're going to have multiple growth points. So you'll see that dahlia is going to start being bushy right off the bat because it has multiple areas where it's going to start growing from. So again, this is the anatomy of a tuber: the body, the neck, and then the eye right in that crown area of the tuber. So the first thing we do is we start cleaning off these little roots. We're also gonna check for anything that's broken or damaged or any diseases. So we kind of wanna do a full inspection before we move on. But I always think removing any of these little pieces is always nice because it's less intimidating. You don't have as much going on in that clump. So right now, everything looks good. We've cut out those roots, and I'm gonna cut out anything that kind of has a broken neck or is damaged, like this one right here. I'm gonna cut that off. This one over here, also, it looks a little bit intact, but you can tell that the neck is kind of wobbly. So I know this is probably not gonna be a viable tuber. So I'm just gonna cut that right off. And now we go back to inspecting. Sometimes you're going to see that you have a tuber that is a little bit shriveled up. Sometimes that's okay. I can see that this one does have the smallest little eye. Let me zoom in and show you guys. This one does have an eye right over here in this circle. So right there is an eye right there. But it is kind of shriveled up. It feels a little bit soft. So I can leave it, or I can give this eye to one of the bigger ones, or I can just cut them all together. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna take out the tag. I'm gonna take out my knife. I'm gonna cut that stem off like that. We'll put kind of the garbage on this side. And then let me just inspect one more time. So this is the mother. We didn't talk about the mother tuber yet. So this is the mother tuber. This is the one that you planted last year. And you can always identify the mother because it's a lot darker than the new ones. So what is great about ordering or having your tubers labeled with a marker is you can always tell easily which one was the mother. But again, if you don't have it labeled that way, you'll know because it's a lot darker and it just has a harder skin than all of the new babies that it produced. So keep that in mind when you see these dark ones, and you can plant them again. However, even though they will grow, they won't produce as many or as high quality tubers as the first year. So typically we just discard this one. Some people do plant it and they have success with it, but for me, I just go ahead and discard that one. So anyways, getting back to our clump here, I can tell that this one has a really big eye here. There's also another eye, and it's so tricky to tell when in the beginning when you're not used to spotting them right off the bat. And it's important to also look on the underside because sometimes you might not see the eye right at the top of the collar, but it can be on the underside. So let me just get that nice and wet. And then, so like right here on this one, there's an eye right there. There's just like the tiniest little swelling. There's also an eye right there. See? It's kind of difficult to tell. But hopefully the camera's focusing in for you guys. Let's see if we can get closer. Maybe not. But yeah, there's an eye right over there, and you can always touch it too. If you can't see that close, you can touch it and you'll feel that little bit of a swelling. So what I think I'm going to do is cut down the middle, and I'm gonna avoid that eye, but I'm just gonna take that right down the center. And that's going to make the biting a lot easier. So this is the mom. We're gonna cut her out. We don't really need her anymore. And now I'm just gonna cut around and see if I have any diseases. Sometimes if I see a little bit of the dark, that just could be a little bit of rot, and it typically stops after you divide it. But you can always continue cleaning it. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Just depends on how deep it goes. But we will let these sit for a couple of days before we store them. So this should all heal over and there shouldn't be any issues. But here's a viable tuber. And now we go back to our clump. And I think, okay, again, this one does have that little eye right there. And I could just cut right here, and this little thing will produce a dahlia. Believe it or not, this will produce a full dahlia. But you know what, I really don't need to be super selfish about these. So I'm just going to cut that off, and I'm going to cut here. And let's see, I think everything else looks really good. Maybe I'll just do one more slice down here. Perfect, just like that. And that one looks really good to me. So I will just grow these all together. Again, there's multiple eyes on this one, which again, I'm just going to have multiple stems, multiple shoots coming out, and you'll see a bushier plant that way. There's also an eye right here on the underside. Do you see that little swelling right there? I'll just color the tip of it so you can see. That is also an eye. So let's just continue with a similar clump. See? Just like that. Oh yeah, that is a nice clump. That is a sexy clump because this is going to be super easy to divide. So the first thing I'm going to do is, again, just clean up our clump. Take out any of those little roots that we see here. Perfect, just like that. Move that off to the side. Okay, now I'm going to come in and just remove anything that I see that is damaged. Again, we're just still in that cleaning phase. Perfect, just like that. This one is called Crazy Legs, and it kind of does look like it has some crazy legs, doesn't it? This one actually had a really unique bloom where it was like 3 flowers on one head. I'll pop up a picture, but that was pretty cool. So anyways, the next thing we're going to do is check for our eyes in the collar area and the crown area. And I can see this one has multiple eyes. It's probably not going to come through right away, but I will show them as I'm dividing them. When I get a clump like this, it makes me so happy because I know it's going to be pretty straightforward. The only thing that is a little bit tricky is when we have them growing in like that instead of just in a circular way. You can tell there's multiple layers of tubers. So like here's one layer, here's a second layer, and then you have the ones on the bottom. So that does make it a little bit tricky. Oh, this one has a broken neck. I'm gonna cut that off. So I think what I'm going to do now is see if I can remove this stem. So that's where the growth point was. And just gently take it out like that. Perfect. So we'll start off with this clump here, this portion of the clump, because you see, if we turn it down on the other underside, we can divide it a lot better. And just even on the bottom here, I can see multiple eyes in this clump. So let's see. Right here is one eye, right here is another, and right here is another. So just right there, there's 3 little eyes right there. Hopefully the camera's focusing for you guys, but there's 1, 2, 3. So right where that circle is, there's an eye inside, and then on this side, there's an eye right there. You guys see it right there? Okay, so now this one has an eye right there, has a neck, and it has a body. Everything looks intact. Sometimes when I see little nicks like that, I just cut it right down the middle like that, or right off. That way this will heal over and it'll be just fine. That way, if there was any like bacteria in this little cut right there, it's not gonna continue getting rotten or spreading that bacteria. So you can definitely cut the body of the tubers. That's not the most important part. Remember, the eyes are. So even like on this one is pretty nicked. I can just cut it right down the middle like that. And you see it kind of looks like a potato. And this will be just fine. Obviously it's a big cut, so I'm gonna let it heal over. But if there is an eye to this one, which I do see an eye to this one, it will be just fine. there is an eye right up here. Oh, I kind of marked it, but there is an eye right up there. If I'm too worried, I can just cut this and leave this as a unit. Cut this off, just like that. So you kind of have to be ruthless, you guys. And there you go. So this can be planted together. Of course, they have to heal over. But yeah, this will be a perfectly viable tuber. I'm a little bit iffy of this one. You know what? I don't see an eye on this one. I can see that the bodies look really good, the necks look good, but I'm not seeing a growth point on this one. But what I can do is set this aside. I'm gonna label it, set this one aside, and I will just put it in a container and grow it by itself. I'm not going to waste precious garden space, you know, on these that I'm not sure of. What I do is I'll just plant them up in a container, and if it grows, great, I can transplant it, and if it doesn't, then no harm, no foul. So let's continue. We'll have a little bit more. Look at that one. Look at how long that one is. Isn't that insane? So it's safe to say that Crazy Legs likes to produce nice long tubers. And the crazy thing is, you guys, I planted my tubers 2 months late last season, because you guys remember the whole fiasco with our backyard, with the grading and everything that we had going on. So when I tell you, I am surprised at how many tubers produced in that short period of time. It's actually pretty insane to me. And I think it's because, remember, tuber production really happens like that last few weeks. Anyways, I am pleasantly surprised, and I just can't imagine how big they're going to be this year now that I get to plant them in the ground on time. So here's one really long tuber, which is kind of crazy. Here's the neck, and then the eye is right there. That little circle with that little swelling. Okay, so let's move up in level of difficulty. This one is Pipsqueak, and this one has 2 stems that came out. So again, we're getting that layering effect going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean up and remove anything that's damaged, or just like all these little skinny pieces that aren't really doing much for us. So let's just cut that out. And again, we're checking for anything damaged or diseased. Get that out of the way to make our lives easier when we are dividing. Just like that. Now we set her down. Looks a little bit better. And now, because there's 2 stems, typically what you can do is gently pull them apart. This one, let's see, this one's not gonna give us a lot of give. So you kind of have to decide, okay, do you wanna cut straight down the middle, or can you divide some of the tubers on the upper side here on that first layer before we go down to the bottom? I think with this one, we can just divide what's up here, and I can see already there are some necks that are a little bit, you see that? They're a little bit wobbly. They're not really connected. So that's not gonna do anything for us. Cut that out. This one as well, just too bad because there's a lot of eyes in this one. So again, I'm looking at the crown of this clump, and I can show you right here. Get that wet. There's little pink eyes right along this area. So it might be a little bit hard to see, but there are eyes, and these are actually pink, and sometimes you'll see that they're green, sometimes you'll see that they're pink, and the closer we are to springtime, the more pronounced those eyes are going to be. So there's just a bunch of little eyes in this area right here. So I think what I'll do next is come in with these guys, and I'm going to just cut the ones that are very visible to me from the top. So like right there, right there, perfect. Let's see. Let's Flip her upside down, see if there's anything good going on the underside. Not much going on down here. So I'm gonna cut the stems back a little bit. Like that. And then what you can do is just kind of go down the middle of your stem. Like this. And that will kind of help you start dividing. I can see there's a cut. So I'm gonna just flip her upside down and continue cutting right down the center. Perfect, just like that. And I did damage this tuber, that's totally fine. This is a perfect example of an eye right here. So you can see that right there. You see that? That just around that little circle, and then there's the little tip right there. All right, this one is going to really make us work for it. So we've divided a couple of simple ones that are a little bit harder. And now let's move to this one, which when you see it, you're like, why would I even want to try to divide this? This seems like a monstrosity, but we're going to do it. Remember last year we had a really big clump. I think it was a cafe au lait, and we got like 20 tubers out of it. This one is a little bit tricky just because we have so many of these tiny little guys. And I think the reason why this happened is because I planted them so late and these just didn't develop in time. So you just have a lot of these like stringy ones attached. So in the event you do have clumps like this or that are even bigger, we follow the same steps. We're gonna clean it up first. So you know what? I'm not even gonna waste my time with these little guys. I'm just gonna cut them up. Let's get rid of all these skinny little things dangling off here. I just cut those roots. We're again checking for anything that's damaged. Just like that. Got this guy. And you'll notice when you guys grow dahlias that you buy like in a nursery, you'll see that oftentimes they're like in these little tiny clumps, where when you order from a farm, it's typically like one tuber. So you can tell that like a clump like this has multiple mother tubers. So you can tell that these two are definitely darker than this one, for example. So now I have a feeling this one's gonna not have a lot of viable tubers, even though it looks like, you know, at first glance, you're like, wow, this one's gonna give me a lot of good stuff. But the necks on these are pretty wobbly and there's just so many different layers. But either way, let's continue. Okay, so now I'm just inspecting the top here and I can see that there were multiple stalks. So I'm just gonna see if I can divide those. Yeah, it's just being really stubborn. So you kind of have to make the tough decision. Are you gonna cut this down the middle? And I think I will. Okay, perfect. Now we have a piece that is a little bit more manageable, and we can continue. Perfect. Look at that. That's great. There's the body, there's a very short neck, and then there's the eye right in here. And now this is kind of a cool view. You can kind of see it just straight down the middle. You can see where the stalks were, where that crown was. There's a tuber cut in half. So it's kind of a cross-sectional view. So let's continue dividing this one. Okay, let's just divide this one too, because I wanted to show you guys, look at how big this one is. Look at that, that's a thick tuber right there. And I think this was the mother tuber. So again, we're gonna clean her up. Even though we're gonna get rid of her, it's just nice to get everything cleaned up. And look at this, how funny is this? You have one tuber, and then look, you have multiple little tubers forming from it. It looks like little feet. Isn't that crazy? And I'm just gonna cut those off. I'm not sure what causes them to do that, but I have several of my clumps that did that. So I'm just gonna cut that off. And this variety is called I Do. Really beautiful white one. Okay. So let's see. So we have the stalk right there, and then I'm just looking at the crown. Again, just identifying eyes, and I see some really great eyes on this one. So I'm gonna try to remove this stalk first. Whoop, and then that one just broke right in half, just like that. And I'm kind of suspicious about this one. I'm gonna cut the mother off, just like that. There was the mama, see? And this one does have a little bit of rot going down pretty deep, but if it doesn't go too close to the eyes, it should be fine. This one does not have an eye, as I don't see one. There could be one right here. I'm very doubtful, but you know what? He'll be a good contender just to save, and we'll pre-sprout these.
There is an eye, I see it.
Oh, Sergey says he sees an eye. From all the way from over there, you see an eye?
Yep.
Oh, wow. You must be steady then, because you have 50-50 vision. So that's a good for this. Let's just label this one. That previous variety, you guys, I was very naughty and I didn't label it. Or the label might have fallen off. So I'm gonna just have to blindly plant those. This one is I do. Oh, that makes me think of our wedding.
I didn't.
You didn't. I do.
I have no memory.
It was all a dream. You're funny. Okay, perfect. We'll keep those 3. Does this chunky little thing have any eyes? Let's see. This one does not. It kind of looks like it might. But you know what? It's so damaged right there. See that rot? I mean, we can cut it and it should be fine, but it kind of goes deep. It kind of stops right there, but if we cut even further, isn't that cool? I don't know. Sometimes I just like to cut them, like if I know I'm not going to use them, just to see, like, I don't know. I have a biology major, so I'm just such a science nerd. And I love dissecting plants. Look at this one. This was the mother. If we cut her in half. Look at that. How cool is that? I love that. All right. Okay, so now that we have them all divided, this is the next step. I lay them out in just a tray like this, and I will let them sit here for a day or 2, just so all of the cuts that we made today can heal over before we put them back into storage. So these are ones that I just divided the other day, and you can see that they're starting to heal over really nicely. So these are ready to go back into storage. And what I do is I put them back into the vermiculite. So I mentioned this last year, how we like to store our tubers in vermiculite. This one is a little bit different than the one I used last year. I'm just testing it. This one's a little bit thicker. But you do want to make sure that it's moist. So not too wet, not too dry, just kind of feels cool to the touch. And I talked about this in a video last year that I'll link down below. But anyways, you want to put it back in vermiculite. If you don't have vermiculite, you could also use wood shavings. I just find wood shavings is a little bit drying, so you kind of have to keep an eye out on that. But one thing that I'm doing this year to kind of experiment is storing them in a saran wrap. So this is a thing that like the Dahlia Society recommends. So let me open this one. These have been in here for, I would say, a couple of months, but do you see that? It's still firm. It's not mushy. There's no mold or rot. And it's just been sitting in saran wrap. And I do store these in an area that stays about 55 degrees. Typically you want to store them in a space that stays around 45 to 55 degrees, and you'll be ready to plant them outside once your soil temperature reaches about 55 degrees and the temperature doesn't dip below 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So for us, that's going to be around May time, around Mother's Day, when we get these all planted outside. But what a great investment that is, right? Like one tuber that you planted produces all of these babies here. Look at that. I think, let's see, this one goes there. I think these are all the same variety right there. Look at that, isn't that crazy? Anyways, that's going to wrap up today's video. Let me know in the comment section if this was useful to you guys, or if you have any questions. Again, I'm always here to help. And again, don't be intimidated by this process. This should not be a scary thing. You're going to do just fine. Don't worry if you cut something that you weren't supposed to. You have more tubers, and if you don't, you're going to grow some more beautiful flowers this year, so it's gonna be okay. But yeah, I'm gonna continue just snipping away and dividing these guys and just see how many more we get from all of these clumps. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.